Okay, so let's finish this. So I need to work on this stripe a little bit more. I simply need to work with it. Let's see. With the blob brush and extending what I need. Nothing major, but it's all time consuming when it's finishing it off. Okay, so the technique to know where I want to erase, I've just merged those two. Remember, it's the opposite of the eraser. So I'm going to take that path, go to transparency, take it down so I can see around it, and then erase around the things I want to reveal, because I don't want to have to use white. Still try to make them nice fluid shapes. Strong where they need to be strong. Then get rid of this one entirely. And then smooth that one edge out. Take its opacity up to 100%. Transparency. And you can find it under your windows, but it's this one right here. It's gradations, which we'll learn about in coloring, and transparency. Right now I'm just using it as kind of a mask. And then I am simply going to use the pencil tool to redraw this corner right here. So it just jogs in a little bit and then reconnects. Nope. And then maybe smooth it out, and then I'll be done. And that smoothing, I didn't like what it did. Go back to the pencil tool. I don't think I want it that sharp though. On and on and on. Try to smooth it out. Get exactly what you want. It's what Illustrator makes possible, but it's frustrating how long it takes. All right. Remember, the eraser does not give you clean, smooth lines, so sometimes you have to go over them again with the smooth tool or the pencil tool. Okay, I've got my tips of my wings. I'm not decorating my oak shapes just yet. What do I need? I'm just going to do one last layer that fills in this black here. Kind of fills in the gaps around the helmet. So carries that on. This is a new layer, so I feel safe doing this. Not modifying anything existing, just fill it in with black. And then on this side, something similar. Yeah, actually, why not just this? That'll work. Okay, so I finished my logo. It's black and white. I'm going to use pencil tool, look at it really quick, unlock everything so that I can edit it if I need to. Everything that's visible. Delete the things that aren't visible because you don't need them if they're not visible. But I do like to keep my sketch back there even though I do hide that. Clean up little things. Oh, it's endless, endless, endless. And this is what I noticed that brought me down here. I need to just extend that a little bit. And I need to work on this eye. Okay. So once you are finished with it as black and white, very important that you save it as a black and white file. So save as Carl Assignment 6 black and white Illustrator file. To my vector coat of arms, I'm updating it. All the defaults turned on. Now, for how do we put it onto PhotoBucket and how do we start playing with color? Now I say File, Save As, an EPS file. It's a different file format. It allows it to move between Photoshop and Illustrator. To the desktop, save. Use all the defaults. Then you can close Illustrator. Now, I open up Photoshop. And I say File, New. And I want this to be Carl Assignment 6 logo, black and white, and color. And I want it to be careful because it will try to pull it from the clipboard. 9 by 12 inches by 350 pixels per inch. RGB mode, white background. Then I drag, this is the important part, I drag my EPS file onto my background. Once it looks good, pretend this is matted 9 by 12. You hit return. That looks good to me. Then I am going to double click it. I'll show you why this matters. I'm going to turn off the background, double click my vector, and turn on a stroke. For the first time we know what a stroke looks like. And I'm going to add a white offset stroke to the outside just a little bit. And this is what it would look like. So if I fill my background, I'm going to take my background and fill it, edit, fill with white. Not with white, I'm sorry, with gray, 50% gray. And so by giving a stroke to my logo, it will show me how smooth everything is and how even everything is. And I can see it's a nice way of troubleshooting it to see where there's little spots. But that's good enough to submit. So now what I do is I turn off my background and I save it as a PNG so that it's transparent, no background, but it will have the white stroke and it will be the black logo. So it will show up on any website. And I'm going to save that to the desktop. So that's the black and white submission. Okay, now I'm going to work with my Photoshop and I'm going to play with color effects. So let's make a duplicate of that. So I have my black and white one safe. And now I'm going to do more effects. And the first I can do is a color overlay. What if I want to replace that black ink with a red ink? What is that going to look like? That's at 100%. It's a very bright red. So why don't I dim that a little bit? What if I want to add a gradient to it? And I want that gradient to be from dark to light in a linear angle from top to bottom. That looks pretty good. I can play with the opacity of that as well. On normal mode, but I can also do multiply mode just to darken it. Or I could do screen mode. That looks pretty good. Now, what if I want to give it a satin kind of glow, my color logo, around all the edges? You see that satiny ripple? Like a royal cape. I can play with that. I can play with different blending modes. Basically, you can play endlessly with color options while still using your vector as a smart layer within Photoshop. But you first and foremost want your vector to be nice and clean and smooth. And I still have little things I can do for mine before I turn it over to a client. I could even give it a texture. Under Bevel and Emboss Texture, I like to, use the random sand texture. I like to invert it. And I like to make it a very subtle depth with a pretty subtle scale. So you can see that. You can even bring in your own textures. This is all just as a vector element. So it's like kind of embossed stamp now. I can give it an inner glow. If I want. And I can kind of soften that out. Make it faint. It's like satin effect, but just around all of the edges. And I can make it whatever color I want. So if I wanted to go a little bit purple, I could add kind of the pink to it, or a purplish tint to it, or blue. But it's on screen mode, so it has to be lighter than what I have. Something very subtle. And you can play with all of these options. Right. Now what's nice about that, and there's more, I can add a drop shadow behind it to really set it off for color. I probably don't want it to be that opaque or that hard-edged. But that's basic coloring. And what's nice about that is you can see it all in my layers here. I can turn the effects off and on. The only reason there's still a stroke behind it is because I have the background turned on behind it. I can turn that off, and I can turn these effects on and off. I can turn off satin. I can turn off inner glow. I can turn off drop shadow. I can turn off the stroke. And I can just see what they look like on their own as a colored logo. I can change my background or add a new layer and fill a background with white so I can see how it would print. And that's all without adding any coloring within Illustrator itself. You can even make your drop shadow a color. So if I want the complement of the red, I might go for like a dark greenish drop shadow. But I've never liked green that much, so maybe I'll do something like that. Make it really subtle, really soft. Okay, then once you have a color solution you like, you're going to save that. Same thing as a PNG with backgrounds turned off. And then those are the three